Episode 1. The First Key. They told him it was just another room, a place to sleep, nothing more. But when the motel clerk slid the tarnished brass key across the counter, something about it felt heavier than metal. As if it had been passed through too many hands, too many nights, carrying the weight of every secret it had unlocked. The traveler, no name yet, just another man on a highway with nowhere to be, walked across the gravel lot. The wind carried the sour smell of rain-soaked asphalt and something else. Coppery, metallic, the kind of smell that doesn't belong outside. He ignored it. The key read room 6. Inside, the air was stale, curtains drawn. A single lamp buzzed like a dying insect. The bed sagged in the middle as if it had swallowed dozens of bodies whole. He dropped his bag, trying to convince himself this was temporary, just a night. But then he saw the drawer. Every motel room has a drawer. This one was slightly open, inviting him. He hesitated, hand trembling before sliding it open further. No Bible, no hotel notepad, just a notebook, leather cracked, pages swollen from dampness. He opened it. Names. Each page carried a name, scratched in hurried handwriting, a date, and a single word beside it. Drowned, burned, hung, torn. The traveler felt his chest tighten as he flipped faster, past decades of names, until he reached the last page. There was his name, written in the same shaky scrawl, dated today. The lamp flickered. He dropped the notebook, his breath catching. He had never been here before. No one should know him here. But someone, something, had written his death into this room before he had even arrived. The walls seemed closer now. The mirror across the room warped his reflection, distorting his face into something gaunt, hollow-eyed, already dead. The traveler stumbled back, clutching the key in his hand as if it could protect him. That's when he heard it. A knock, soft, measured, coming from inside the closet. His throat went dry. He forced a laugh, shaky and thin, convincing himself it was just his nerves. But the knock came again. 3 slow beats, like a hand that had been waiting too long. The notebook lay open on the floor, pages fluttering though the window was shut. His name glared back at him, written in ink that looked suspiciously like it had never dried. The traveler stepped closer to the closet. The knocking stopped. Silence. And then, from the crack beneath the door, something seeped out. Not shadow, not smoke, but a darkness so thick it moved with weight, curling across the carpet toward his feet. He froze. He wanted to run, but the key in his hand had already turned cold, so cold it burned. This was no Episode 2. The Woman at the Mirror. They say mirrors never lie, but in room 6 the mirror wasn't a reflection, it was a warning. Elena checked in just before midnight. She was tired, dragging a suitcase and a past she refused to talk about. The motel clerk didn't ask questions. No one ever did here. They just gave her the key, that same brass weight, and looked away as if afraid of what might follow her inside. The room greeted her with silence, curtains drawn tight, air heavy with dust and old perfume. She turned on the bathroom light, and that's when she saw it. Her reflection blinked, half a second too late. Elena froze, her fingers still on the switch. She leaned closer. Her face stared back, but something was wrong. The woman in the mirror looked older. Her skin mottled with bruises, lips split and swollen, eyes drowning in sorrow. Not her, not yet. "Hello?" she whispered, as if the glass might answer. And it did. The reflection's lips moved, but no sound came. Elena stumbled back, her heart hammering. The woman in the mirror raised her hand, palm pressed against the glass. Elena's own hand lifted unwillingly, meeting it. For a breathless moment, skin and glass separated 2 versions of herself. Then she saw it, a dark handprint forming around her throat in the reflection, fingers squeezing, pressing. Elena gasped. She touched her own neck. Nothing. But in the mirror she was choking, eyes bulging, veins standing out like ropes. She screamed and flicked off the light. Darkness. Just her ragged breathing, the pulse in her ears. When she dared to turn the switch back on, the mirror was empty. No reflection at all. Elena backed into the bedroom, trembling. But the mirror had followed her. Not the one in the bathroom, the one in the dresser across the room. Its glass shimmered faintly, though the lamp was off. She stepped closer, unable to stop herself. The reflection was back, older, broken, a version of Elena she didn't want to become. This time the bruised reflection whispered clearly, her voice vibrating through the glass. "Don't stay, don't let him in." Elena's blood ran cold. The lamp flickered. The air shifted. She felt a presence in the room now, heavy, watching. Slowly, she turned toward the door. Someone was knocking. The sound echoed through the room, steady, deliberate. But the reflection in the mirror wasn't looking at the door. She was staring directly at Elena, mouth wide open in a silent scream. And when the knocking stopped, the bruised reflection reached out. Her hand didn't stop at the glass this time. It came through. The last thing Elena saw before everything went dark was her own hand, being pulled finger by finger into the mirror. Because in room 6, the mirror doesn't show who you are. It shows what's coming for you. Episode 3, The Stained Bed. They thought the bed was made for pleasure, but in room 6, pleasure never ended the way you expected. Marcus and Lila were young, reckless, and hungry for each other. They pulled into the motel on a storm-soaked night, laughing as thunder rolled over the hills. To them, room 6 was just a stop on the road, a secret place where no one would judge. The bed sagged low in the middle, the springs groaning as if it remembered too much. Marcus kissed her. Lila laughed. And for hours the room filled with the sound of bodies colliding, sheets tangling, whispers dissolving into desperate cries. The storm outside clapped like applause, but at 3 a.m. the laughter stopped. Lila woke first. She reached for Marcus, her fingers brushing the hollow dip in the mattress where he should have been. The sheets were cold. She sat up. The room was silent, too silent, except for the faint dripping sound. She turned toward the bathroom. No light, no Marcus. Then she smelled it. Iron, salt, the raw metallic sting of blood. Her heart raced as she peeled back the blanket. The sheets beneath were soaked, dark, sticky, glistening even in the thin light from the window. The stain spread wide, seeping from the very center of the mattress, as though the bed itself was bleeding. "Marcus?" she whispered. The bed creaked, slowly, deliberately, and then she saw it. A hand, his hand, emerging from the soaked sheets, fingers twitching, nails broken, skin pale as wax. It clawed upward as if Marcus were trapped beneath, drowning in the bed itself. Lila screamed, pulling back, but the sheets tightened around the hand, dragging it down. She lunged forward to grab him, but all that met her grip was cold fabric, slick with blood. The mattress pulsed beneath her palm, beating like a heart. The stain spread wider, crawling toward her. She stumbled to her feet, shaking, crying out his name. The bed groaned one final time, and then silence. Marcus was gone. All that remained was the red mark, seeping, alive. Lila backed toward the door, but the knob wouldn't turn. She glanced back at the bed and froze. The sheets had smoothed themselves, perfectly tucked, perfectly clean, as if no one had ever touched them, except for one detail, right in the center. A faint outline of Marcus's body pressed into the fabric, waiting, inviting. She dropped the key, screaming, pounding the locked door until her fists were raw. But in room 6, the bed doesn't let go, it only swallows, and the stains never really dry. Episode 4, The Sound Under the Floor. You can ignore whispers in the walls, you can dismiss shadows by the door, but you can't sleep when something is knocking from underneath you. Harold was a truck driver, the kind who lived more nights on the road than at home. The motel was just another stop, another cigarette stubbed out before an early morning haul. Room 6 greeted him with the usual silence, the usual stench of stale smoke and damp carpet. He didn't care. He was exhausted. He kicked off his boots, dropped his cap, and collapsed on the sagging bed. Sleep came fast, heavy, until the knocking began. At first it was faint, 3 soft taps, like knuckles against wood. He stirred, half dreaming, until it came again, louder, sharper. Directly beneath the bed, Harold sat up, listening. Silence. He chuckled at himself, muttered about damn rats, and tried to lie back down. The knocking returned. This time, longer, a desperate pounding, fists slamming against the floorboards. Harold swung his legs over the side. Heart thudding, he pressed his ear to the carpet. The sound was clear now. Something was under there. "Hello?" he said, his voice breaking the quiet. And the knocking answered, in rhythm. 3 beats. A pause. 3 more. as if begging to be let out. Harold scrambled to his feet, pulling the bed away from the wall. He searched for a hatch, a panel, anything. Nothing. Just carpet stretched over floorboards that now pulsed with sound. Then came the voice, muffled, fragile. "Help, please, I can't breathe." Harold froze. His mouth went dry. He dropped to his knees, clawing at the carpet with his thick fingers, tearing fabric until splinters of wood peeked through. The pounding grew frantic. The voice screamed now, words twisting into gasps, sobs. "Open! Open!" Harold's nails split as he ripped up a plank. Beneath was only blackness, a void. He leaned closer, squinting into the hole, and something reached back. A hand, pale and slick with blood, shot out, grabbing his wrist. It was cold, so cold it burned. Harold screamed, trying to pull free, but the grip tightened, dragging him toward the opening that was far too small for any body. The voice turned guttural, no longer human. "Stay with me." The darkness yawned wider, swallowing the hole, swallowing Harold's arm up to the elbow. He thrashed, kicked, cursed. His other hand clawed for the lamp, smashing it to the floor. Sparks hissed. The room stank of ozone and rot. And then silence. The floor was smooth again. No hole, no blood, no sound. Only Harold's cap, lying in the middle of the room, brim bent, warm with the heat of his panic. Because in room 6, the floor doesn't just support you. Sometimes it waits to take you under. Episode 5, The Phone That Never Rings. Every motel room has a phone. Most people don't notice it. Plastic, yellowed with age, sitting in the corner like a dead thing. In room 6, the phone isn't dead. It's waiting. Clara had driven 6 hours straight, fleeing a fight she didn't want to think about. The motel seemed harmless enough. Cheap, quiet, forgettable. She dropped her bag, lay on the bed, and tried to drown her guilt in silence. That's when the phone rang. She jolted upright. The sound sliced through the room, shrill, insistent. The red light blinked with every tone. Clara frowned. Who would call her here? The clerk hadn't even asked for her name. The ringing continued, steady, unnatural. She reached out, hand trembling, and lifted the receiver to her ear. Silence. No, worse than silence, breathing, wet, ragged, too close. "Hello?" she whispered. The breath deepened, dragging, as if whoever was on the line was leaning right beside her. Clara slammed the receiver down, her heart racing. She told herself it was a prank, some crossed line, but the phone rang again, louder this time. She refused to answer. She stuffed the pillow over her head, humming to herself, trying to drown it out. But the ringing bled through, each note drilling into her skull until her teeth hurt. Finally shaking, she grabbed the phone. "Stop it!" she cried. "Leave me alone!" A pause. Then a whisper slid through the line, broken and guttural. "Room 6 never empties." The words made her stomach drop. "Who is this?" The voice chuckled, low and wet, like a throat filling with blood. Then, "Look behind you." Clara spun. The room was empty, just the curtains fluttering from a breeze that shouldn't exist. She clutched the phone tighter, breath shallow. When she lifted the receiver again, the voice was gone. Instead, she heard faint clicking, like nails tapping glass. She pressed the phone closer. The sound grew louder, clearer, until it felt like it was coming from inside the receiver itself. And then, someone whispered her name. Her real name, the one she hadn't given anyone. Clara dropped the phone, but the voice didn't stop. The sound now bled from the air itself, filling the room. The phone's red light blinked faster, faster, until it stayed on, glowing like an eye. She stumbled toward the door, fumbling with the lock. The phone screamed behind her, not ringing now but shrieking, a sound that split the air like metal tearing. She yanked the door open and froze. The hallway was gone. Only darkness stretched outside, endless and swallowing. Behind her, the phone hissed, the line alive with breathing. Clara realized the call hadn't come from outside the motel. It hadn't even come from inside the office. The call was coming from the room itself. Because in room 6, the phone doesn't connect you to someone else. It connects you to what's already there. Episode 6, The Boy Who Knocked. Children aren't supposed to hear things adults can't. But in room 6, innocence doesn't protect you. It damns you. The Carters stopped for the night. A husband, a wife, and their 7-year-old son, Daniel. It was late, and the family was too tired to care what the motel looked like. They carried their bags into room 6, closed the curtains, and collapsed into uneasy sleep. At 2 a.m., Daniel woke to a sound. Knocking. 3 gentle raps at the door. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, listening. His parents didn't stir. The knock came again, soft, almost playful. "Mom?" he whispered. No answer. Daniel padded across the room, tiny feet brushing the carpet. He reached the door and pressed his ear to the wood. Silence. Then, another knock, directly against his head. He giggled nervously, like it was a game. "Who's there?" The voice was faint, muffled by the door. "A friend." Daniel smiled. He reached for the handle. But something stopped him. Not a hand, not his parents. Something colder, an instinct he didn't have words for. He pulled back, chewing his lip, and returned to bed. The knocking didn't stop. It followed him. 3 taps, always 3. This time from the window. Daniel turned. The curtains bulged, the rod trembling as if someone leaned against the glass. The knock came again, inside the room now, from the closet. He crawled under the blanket, whispering to himself, "Not real, not real." But the sound seeped through the fabric, steady and patient. Knock, knock, knock. Finally, he shook his mother awake. "Mom, someone's knocking." She frowned, groggy. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Go back to sleep." "But, Mom," Daniel whispered, wide-eyed. "He says he's my friend." Her blood ran cold. "Who?" Before Daniel could answer, the closet door rattled violently, hinges straining. Both parents sat up now, staring as the wood buckled. The knocking grew louder, faster, no longer playful but desperate, furious. "Don't open it!" the father barked, dragging Daniel close. But the boy shook his head, tears spilling. "He needs me." The closet burst open. Darkness poured out, thick, crawling, alive. Within it, the faint outline of a boy's face grinned, pale and eyeless. It raised a hand, knocking against nothing, knocking against air. Daniel screamed. His parents held him tight as the shadow reached, tendrils curling toward the bed. The father fumbled for the light switch, but the bulb only flickered, dim, powerless. And then, as suddenly as it began, the knocking stopped. The closet door hung loose. The darkness retreated. But when the mother turned to comfort her son, Daniel was gone. Only the blanket remained, warm and indented, as if he had just slipped beneath it. Because in room 6, the knocking always finds a child to answer. Episode 7, The Woman in the Wallpaper. Some guests swore they saw a shadow in the corner. Others complained about a strange smell, something sweet, like rotting fruit. But for me, it was the wallpaper. I had checked into room 6 after a fight with my husband. The motel was the only place within miles. A cheap roadside stop with flickering neon and a front desk clerk who barely looked at me. Inside, the room was dated. Green carpet, a sagging bed, and walls covered in floral wallpaper that curled at the edges. At first, I thought stress was making me imagine things, because the flowers didn't look still. They seemed to shift, as though the petals were turning, reaching, almost breathing. I turned off the lamp, telling myself I was overtired. But when the room went dark, I noticed something worse, a faint outline. The shape of a woman's face embedded in the wallpaper, her mouth frozen mid-scream. I jolted upright, heart hammering. The face was gone when I flicked the light back on, the wallpaper flowers flat again. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel someone staring at me from the walls. By morning, I told myself it was just exhaustion. I packed, ready to leave, but the bathroom stopped me. The wallpaper in there was peeling badly, water-stained and moldy. I tugged a corner back without thinking and nearly dropped my phone. Beneath the layer of flowers was another pattern. Not wallpaper, not paint. It was fabric, stained, yellowing cloth, and drawn on it, in frantic, jagged ink, were dozens of faces, wide eyes, open mouths, each one screaming. I stumbled back, bile rising. My phone flashlight caught something else. Words scratched faintly across the plaster beneath the cloth. "Don't let her out." Suddenly, the air in the room thickened. The sweet, rotting smell overwhelmed me. I looked up, and the woman's face was back. Only now, she wasn't flat. She was pressing out of the wall, as if the wallpaper were skin, and she was trying to claw her way through. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Still, I understood. She wanted me to peel it all away. I bolted, left my bag, my keys, everything. I drove until dawn, shaking, heart pounding, the phantom scent of rotten fruit clinging to my clothes. The motel clerk would later swear I never checked in that night, that no one did. Room 6, he said, had been locked for years, ever since the last guest tried to tear the wallpaper off with her bare hands, and failed. Episode 8, The Knock at 3:15. The motel had many rules posted on faded signs by the front desk. No smoking, no pets, quiet after midnight. But there was one rule the clerk whispered to me privately, his eyes never quite meeting mine. If you hear a knock at 3:15, don't answer it, no matter what. I laughed it off. Superstition, I thought. Old motels collected stories the way walls collected stains. But when the night came, and I was alone in room 3, I couldn't shake his words. The room was plain enough. One queen bed, a chipped dresser, a buzzing fluorescent light in the bathroom. I fell asleep quickly, but something yanked me out of my dreams. A sound. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door. I glanced at the clock, 3:15 a.m. My mouth went dry. My heart drummed. I told myself it was just another guest. Maybe drunk, knocking on the wrong door. But then 3 more knocks. Louder. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing on the other side. No footsteps, no breathing, just silence. I climbed back into bed, blanket up to my chin, forcing myself to ignore it. And then I heard the voice. "Please, open up." It was a woman's voice, fragile, shaking, desperate. Every instinct screamed at me to help, but the clerk's warning thundered in my mind. I stayed still. Minutes passed. Then, another knock, softer this time, and the voice again, closer, like it was pressed right against the wood. "Please, let me in. He's coming." I felt my stomach twist. Against every shred of reason, I reached for the handle. My fingers brushed it. Cold, freezing metal. Then I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe survival, maybe fate. Because just then, something else knocked. Not from the hallway, from the inside. 3 sharp knocks echoed from inside the closet. I spun around, blood turning to ice. The closet door trembled as if someone, or something, was pounding to get out. And then silence. The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating. I backed into the corner, waiting, praying. The clock ticked. At exactly 3:16, it all stopped. The weight lifted. The room was just a room again. When I told the clerk the next morning, he nodded like he'd heard it all before. "You did the right thing," he muttered. "Most don't." They opened the door. He slid a photo across the counter. A grainy security camera still, dated 3 years earlier. A woman in a nightgown stood outside a guest's room at 3:15, her face blurred, almost hollow. "The guests that answered her," he said, voice low. "We never saw them check out." Episode 9. The mirror that didn't reflect you. Every motel room has a mirror, but the one in room 12 wasn't glass. It was a trap. I only booked one night. My car had broken down a mile down the road, and the clerk at the front desk tossed me a key with the same tired line. "Stay quiet. Keep the curtains shut." I didn't ask questions. At that hour, I just wanted sleep. The room was stale, air thick with mildew. The mirror above the dresser caught my eye immediately. It was tall, ornate, out of place in such a run-down motel. I glanced at it once and froze. The reflection wasn't quite right. Everything behind me was there. The bed, the lamp, the faded wallpaper. But I wasn't. I waved my hand. Nothing. The mirror showed the room perfectly, just empty. A chill crept over me. I turned the mirror to face the wall, telling myself it was a trick of the light. But at midnight, the sound started. Scratching. From behind the glass. I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to ignore it, but then came the voice. A whisper, muffled, echoing through the glass. "Let me out!" I sat up, heart pounding, staring at the turned-around mirror. The scratching grew violent, like nails raking desperately. Then, silence. I thought it was over, until I noticed movement in the room. The mirror was still turned, but its surface had gone reflective anyway. And in that reflection, the room wasn't empty anymore. Someone was standing where I should have been. A figure. Pale, thin, head tilted unnaturally to the side. Their mouth stretched too wide, smiling, even though my room was silent. Their eyes locked onto me through the glass. I stumbled back, knocking over the lamp. Darkness swallowed the room. But in the mirror, it stayed lit by some sickly glow. The figure raised a hand and placed it against the glass, and then another hand pressed outward, bulging from the surface of the mirror as though the glass were water. I bolted, tearing out of the room barefoot, leaving everything behind. The clerk didn't look surprised when I burst into the lobby. He just sighed. "Room 12, he muttered. "You looked into it, didn't you?" When I nodded, trembling, he shook his head. "Next time, don't expect it to let you go." Episode 10. The phone that only dialed the dead. Most rooms in the motel had no phones. "Too old, too broken," the clerk said. But room 8 still had one, an ivory rotary model. Heavy, dust-coated, sitting on the nightstand. I noticed it the moment I checked in. Its cord curled like a snake. The receiver yellowed with age. I picked it up out of curiosity. No dial tone. Dead. That night the phone rang. I jolted upright in bed. The clock read 2:06 a.m. The ringing was sharp, metallic, too loud for such a small room. Against all reason, I answered. "Hello?" At first silence, then faint breathing, wet, uneven, like lungs filled with water. "Who is this?" I whispered, and then a voice. Broken, warped, like it traveled across decades. "You shouldn't be there." My blood froze. "Who are you?" The line crackled, filled with static. And then another voice, different this time, layered over the first, crying, gasping, begging, "Help me!" The voices tangled together, overlapping, hundreds of them, men and women, whispering, screaming, choking. The noise was unbearable. I dropped the receiver, but it didn't stop. The voices spilled into the room even without me touching it. And then, through this chaos, one voice rose clear, calm. It said my full name. I stared at the phone, heart racing. No one knew I was here, not even my family. The voice spoke again, softer now, almost tender. "Answer when I call again." The line went dead. I barely slept. At dawn, I ran to the front desk, demanding answers. The clerk didn't look surprised. He only asked, "What time did it ring?" 2:06. He paled, muttering under his breath, "Same time, always the same." "What do you mean?" I pressed. He leaned in close, voice dropping. "Every guest who stays in room 8 gets that call, and every guest who answers a second time never checks out." I left before nightfall, but as I drove away, my cell phone lit up on the passenger seat. Unknown number. 2:06 p.m. It was ringing. Episode 11. The Bible that wrote itself. The first thing I noticed in room 2 wasn't the smell of mildew or the buzzing ceiling fan. It was the Bible in the nightstand. Every motel has one, but this one was different. Its leather cover was cracked, pages yellowed. The title embossed so faintly it looked as if it had been clawed away. When I opened it, I nearly dropped it, because my name was written on the first page. Not printed, not scribbled by a stranger. Written in neat, elegant ink for Matthew. Welcome home. I hadn't told the clerk my name. I hadn't signed anything. I slammed the book shut and shoved it back into the drawer. But at midnight, the scratching began. I woke to the sound of pages turning on their own. The drawer rattled softly. My chest tightened. With trembling hands, I pulled it open. The Bible lay open in the center of the room now, though I never moved it. Fresh ink bled across the page as if an invisible hand were writing in real time. "He is watching you." The letters stretched longer, darker, until they almost tore the page. My pulse hammered. I backed away, but the words kept forming. "Don't leave." The lamp flickered, shadows thickened around me, and then the pen strokes grew frantic, carving deep scars into the paper, almost ripping it apart. "He is here." The Bible slammed shut with a force that shook the nightstand. The room went silent, except for one thing, breathing, slow, heavy, right behind me. I spun around. Nothing there, just the empty bed, the peeling wallpaper, the flickering lamp. But when I turned back, the Bible was open again, on a page I hadn't seen before, a passage I didn't recognize, written in that same black ink. It described me, my clothes, my face, the exact moment I was standing there reading it. And at the bottom of the page, words appeared that froze me in place. "Next, he will touch your shoulder." I didn't wait. I bolted out of the room, sprinting past the front desk, never looking back. But in the parking lot, as I fumbled with my keys, I felt it. A hand, cold, firm, resting on my shoulder. Episode 12. The TV that played the wrong channel. Room 4 had no cable box, no remote, just a bulky old television with dials that barely worked. The clerk warned me, "Don't turn it on after midnight." I laughed, thinking it was just another one of the motel's strange superstitions. Of course, at 12:03, I turned it on. Static, thick and heavy, buzzing through the room like a swarm of bees. I twisted the dial. No channels, just white noise. But then, the static shifted, formed shapes, faces. At first they were blurry, like shadows moving behind frosted glass. Then they sharpened. It was the motel room, my room, the same wallpaper, the same crooked lamp, only I wasn't in it. Someone else was. A man, sitting on the bed, head in his hands. He rocked back and forth, whispering words I couldn't hear. His movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet tugged on strings. I leaned closer, breath fogging the screen. Suddenly the man snapped his head up and stared straight at me. Our eyes locked through the glass. My stomach twisted. I fumbled for the dial, trying to switch it off, but the knob wouldn't budge. The man's lips began to move, and though no sound came from the TV, the words filled the room, like he was whispering directly in my ear. You shouldn't have turned it on. The static deepened, darkening to a storm of black and gray. More figures appeared behind him, women, children, their faces twisted, blurred, all of them staring, all of them whispering. I yanked the plug from the wall. The screen didn't turn off. Instead, the picture sharpened further. Now it showed me, sitting exactly where I was, in front of the TV, my face pale, my eyes wide. Behind me, in the screen's reflection, a shape loomed, tall, faceless, its hand raised over my shoulder. Cold air brushed the back of my neck. I spun around. Nothing. But when I looked back, the figure on the screen was closer, its hand now resting on my shoulder. My own reflection began to smile. Though my face was frozen in terror, the TV flickered, buzzed, and then went black, finally dead. I didn't sleep that night, and when I checked out in the morning, I asked the clerk if anyone else had ever turned on the TV. He stared at me for a long time before answering. They did, but the ones who saw themselves on the screen never left the room alive. Episode 13, The Guest Book That Knew Your Name. The front desk was always dusty, always dim, as if even light didn't want to linger there. But what drew my eyes wasn't the clerk or the yellowed lamp. It was the guest book. It lay open on the counter, thick as a family Bible, pages filled with names written in tight, spidery handwriting. I hadn't signed in yet. I hadn't even spoken my name, and yet, there it was, scrawled neatly on the page for that very night. Evelyn Carter, Room 9. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't told the clerk who I was, hadn't shown him my ID, hadn't even decided how long I'd stay. Still, the book knew me. Just tradition, the clerk muttered when he saw my face. We keep records, that's all. But his voice trembled like he didn't believe it himself. Later, in my room, I couldn't stop thinking about the book. I returned to the front desk around midnight, barefoot. The hallway silent except for the hum of the vending machine. The clerk was gone. The book remained. It had turned a few pages on its own, and there, under my name, a second entry had appeared. Date of departure, September 17th. Cause found in bathtub. My stomach lurched. That was tomorrow's date. I touched the ink, still wet. My fingers came away black. My pulse hammered. This had to be a trick, a prank, some elaborate scare. But then I flipped through more pages. Every name had a departure note. Disappeared. Hanging. Burned. Dozens of deaths, all tied to rooms, all exact, down to the date and hour. And some of the names I recognized. News stories I'd read years ago. Tourists who vanished without explanation. I closed the book hard, heart racing. But when I looked down, it had flipped open again, eager to be read. And this time, the page showed something new. Not just my name, not just my death, but a name written beneath mine. Someone who hadn't checked in yet, someone who would arrive tomorrow. I froze, because the name wasn't just familiar, it was my sister's. Episode 14, The Room Service That Nobody Ordered. The motel didn't have a kitchen, no diner attached, no menu on the bedside table. Yet at exactly 1:00 a.m. someone knocked on my door. Room service. I froze. I hadn't ordered anything. The voice was calm, low, and patient, like a waiter who'd done this countless times. I stayed still, listening. The knock came again, louder. Room service. Curiosity clawed at me. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. No one was there, just a silver tray on the floor, covered by a polished lid. Steam fogged the edges, carrying a smell both sweet and rotten. I should have left it alone. but the heat radiated through the metal, almost pulsing, almost alive. My hands moved on their own, lifting the lid. Inside was a plate of food, steak, still bleeding, mashed potatoes that twitched as if they were breathing, vegetables slick with something that wasn't butter, and at the center of the plate, my wallet. Open, empty. I staggered back, bile rising. My wallet was in my jacket pocket just seconds ago. Trembling, I checked. It was gone. Only the plate held it now. The steak began to shift, its juices spreading across the tray, spelling words in dark red. Eat, pay, stay. The knock came again, harder this time. Room service. The voice was closer now, pressed against the doorframe. My pulse thundered. I kicked the tray into the hall, slammed the door, shoved the dresser in front of it. The knocking didn't stop. It grew frantic, fists pounding, silverware rattling on the floor outside. Then silence. I barely slept, waiting for dawn. When I finally opened the door, the tray was gone. No plate, no lid, no wallet. But smeared across the carpet was a single greasy handprint, larger than any human's, leading away from my room. At checkout, I demanded answers. The clerk only shook his head. You should have never lifted the lid, he said. They only serve what already belongs to you. Episode 15. The ice machine that wasn't empty. Every hallway in the motel hummed with something. Buzzing lights, creaking pipes, the distant groan of wind slipping through cracks. But the loudest hum came from the ice machine at the far end of the second floor. It looked ancient, rust creeping down its sides, a crooked sign taped above the chute. Free ice. I only noticed it because, at midnight, it started running on its own. A low grinding churn, like metal chewing bone. Thirst dragged me from bed. I grabbed the bucket from under the sink and shuffled barefoot down the hall. As I approached, the machine rattled violently, its hum rising into a sickly whine. I pressed the button. The first chunk of ice that fell wasn't ice at all. It was a tooth. Yellowed, cracked, still wet with something darker than water. I stumbled back, the bucket clattering to the floor. But the machine kept spitting. Not cubes, not shards. Teeth, dozens of them, clinking against the metal chute, some small like a child's, others jagged, broken. And then came something worse. A finger, thin, gray, still twitching. The machine's hum deepened, almost a growl now, and I swear I saw something moving behind the grate, pushing the pieces out. Something large, something breathing. I staggered down the hall, heart pounding, but the sound followed me. Clink, 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 as if the machine wouldn't stop until I came back. By the time I reached my room, my bucket was full. Not with ice, not with teeth, but with faces. Tiny, broken, half-formed, pressed against each other, mouths opening and closing soundlessly. I dropped it, screaming. When I looked again, the bucket was empty, just a thin puddle of water on the carpet. The next morning, I asked the clerk about the ice machine. His face went pale. That thing hasn't worked in years, he said. We unplugged it after what we found inside. He wouldn't say what, but later, as I checked out, I saw a fresh sign taped to the lobby door in his handwriting. Guest in room 5, stop using the ice machine at night. I was in room 5. Episode 16, the candle that burned backwards. The candle was nearly gone. Only a stub of wax remained, yet the flame still fought against the darkness, burning with unnatural hunger. Daniel stood in the chapel, surrounded by shadows that moved like restless animals. The air smelled of iron and roses, sweet and sickening, as though life and death had mingled into one. He tightened his grip on the rosary, though the beads felt warmer than his skin, pulsing, almost alive. The flame suddenly flared, casting light against the altar. For a moment, Daniel thought he saw the shape of a woman kneeling there, her body trembling, her lips moving in silent prayer. But when he blinked, the pews were empty again. Then came the whisper, not from the walls nor the shadows, but from inside the candle itself. A voice, delicate and venomous, coiled into his ears. You cannot snuff me out. I am your confession. I am your hunger. I am what you tried to bury. Daniel staggered back, but the chapel door slammed shut. The sound echoed like a coffin lid sealing. The windows rattled, though no wind touched them. The wax began to run in thick rivers down the altar, not white, but dark crimson. Each drop hissed against the stone as if the candle were bleeding. From the melted pool, shapes began to crawl, fingers, pale and bone-thin, dragging themselves upward. The rosary snapped in Daniel's hands. beads scattered across the floor, rolling toward the candle as though drawn by its breath. Daniel tried to speak, but his throat closed. His body trembled, not from fear alone, but from something deeper. A strange heat spread through his chest, an ache that was both desire and terror. The voice inside the flame laughed softly, the sound like glass breaking underwater. Every soul that touched me burns backward. Every prayer you spoke unravels. Soon, priest, you will kneel, not before God, but before me. The flame bent low as though bowing. Then, impossibly, it began to rise from the wick, stretching upward like a figure clothed in fire. A face took form within it, smiling with both pity and cruelty. And Daniel, despite himself, felt his knees weaken. The candle had not yet finished burning, but Daniel knew, in the marrow of his bones, that it was already too late. Episode 17. The Candle That Burned Backwards. The chapel no longer felt like a place of worship. Its arches, once soaring with grace, now sagged like the ribs of a dying beast. Every shadow leaned toward Daniel as if listening, as if waiting. The figure of fire hovered above the altar, its form bending and stretching, neither man nor woman, but something between. A shape beautiful enough to break him, terrible enough to consume him. Its mouth curved in a smile that knew his secrets. "Do you know what burns in me?" the flame whispered, its voice a chorus of all the confessions he had ever heard. The desperate moans of lovers, the sobs of the dying, the muttered lies of the guilty, they all rose within that fire, echoing back at him. "It is not wax, priest, it is you." Daniel's breath shuddered. His knees touched the cold stone floor. His hands, slick with sweat, tried to form the sign of the cross, but the motion broke halfway. His fingers trembled too violently. The candle spat sparks that drifted through the air like fireflies. When they landed on the pews, they did not burn wood. They burned memory. Daniel saw visions flicker across the chapel. Himself as a child, stealing a glance at the body of a woman bathing in the river. Himself as a young priest, doubting God in the stillness of night. Himself now, trembling, half willing to surrender. The flame leaned forward, closer, its heat brushing his face like the kiss of fever. "You have prayed for purity," it murmured. "But purity is nothing without the hunger you deny. Let me devour your prayers. Daniel, let me make you whole." He wanted to scream, he wanted to flee, yet his body betrayed him. His lips parted, his chest heaved as if begging for air. And he realized the awful truth. He was listening. Worse, he was tempted. The crimson wax surged again, spilling over the altar. From it rose more hands, skeletal and desperate, grasping for him, for his flesh, for his faith. The flame's laughter grew louder, ringing against the stone until it sounded less like laughter and more like a hymn. Daniel's voice cracked at last. "God," he rasped, "if you are still here, show me." The chapel fell silent. Even the flame paused, swaying as if curious. Then, from beneath the floorboards, came a sound, a knocking, slow, steady, relentless, as if something buried deep below the chapel was answering. Episode 18. The Knocking Beneath the Chapel. The first knock was hollow, a dull thud that rattled the pews. The second was heavier, shaking the stone floor as if the foundation itself resisted something trying to rise. The third was not a knock at all. It was a heartbeat coming from below. Daniel froze. His own pulse raced, desperate to keep pace with the rhythm rising beneath the chapel. Dust sifted down from the rafters, settling on his trembling hands. The flame hovering above the altar tilted its head, its grin widening like a wound. "Do you hear it, priest?" it whispered. "That is the sound of your God, buried, forgotten, starving." Daniel's mouth went dry. No prayer could climb his throat. The knocking continued, each beat louder, quicker, until the floor between the altar and the pews cracked. Splinters of stone curled upward as though something clawed from beneath. The crimson wax from the cursed candle trickled into the cracks. It hissed as it touched the unseen thing below, and from the fissures seeped a sound, a voice. But it was no holy hymn. It was a sob, low and broken, like a soul begging release. Daniel crawled forward, compelled and horrified, as the floor ruptured further. His fingers hovered above the edge, and there, in the darkness, he saw it, an eye staring back at him, not human, not animal, an eye vast, weeping, its tears as black as tar. The chapel trembled. The benches groaned as if bowing. The flame flickered wildly, delighted, and hissed. The room you guard, the room that never empties, rests upon this grave. Every guest, every scream, every sin, you have fed it for years without knowing. You were never a shepherd, Daniel. You were a warden. Daniel staggered back, but the eye followed him, unblinking, drowning him in its gaze. He felt his heart align with its rhythm, pounding not for God, not for life, but for something vast and imprisoned. The knocking became thunder. The fissures spread across the chapel floor like veins of blood. From deep below, a voice rose, many voices woven into one. Free me, or burn with me. The candle flared, its flame stretching toward the ceiling, scorching the wooden beams. Daniel collapsed to his knees, torn between terror and surrender, between God and the thing that knocked. And for the first time since entering the motel, he understood. The room had never been empty because the emptiness was not absence, it was hunger. Episode 19, The Choice of the Warden. The chapel swayed as though caught in a storm, though outside the night was still. The fissures in the stone widened, groaning like ribs splitting apart. The eye beneath stared at Daniel without blinking, its tears running in rivers that stained the cracks black. The flame above the altar roared, its voice now a choir of laughter and screams. You feel it, don't you? The pull, the truth. You cannot pray it away. Daniel clutched his collar, his chest heaving as though every breath cost him years. He wanted to believe the voice was wrong, that God still waited above, watching, guiding. Yet all he felt was the weight pressing from below, the hunger, the knocking that matched his own frantic heartbeat. The voices from the fissures rose again, pleading, commanding, free me, or burn with me. His gaze shifted to the cursed candle. Its wax streamed endlessly, crimson rivers feeding the cracks. Daniel realized with horror that the candle was not sealing the thing below. It was feeding it, keeping it alive, keeping it waiting. Every guest who had entered the motel, every scream muffled in those walls, had been an offering. And he, Daniel, had been complicit, blind in his devotion. He staggered toward the altar, one hand reaching for the candle, the other trembling in protest. If he snuffed the flame, would it die? Or would it be freed, unleashed in a world that had no defense? The eye blinked. For the first time, it blinked. And in that brief closure, Daniel saw something. Visions of himself standing at the motel desk, greeting strangers, guiding them unknowingly into the jaws of this thing. He saw the blood that had stained the sheets, the confessions that had ended in screams. The room had never stayed empty because he had never allowed it. His knees buckled, a sob tore from his chest. God, tell me what to do. The silence that followed was louder than the knocks, louder than the fire's laughter. God was absent, or hidden. Daniel's hand closed around the candle's base. The heat seared his skin. The wax clung like flesh. His arm trembled as the voices below thundered, shaking the chapel. Free me. The flame above him flickered low, almost mocking, as though daring him to choose. And then Daniel pulled. The candle tilted, its wax spilling in a violent rush. The flame stretched high, a scream of fire, and the cracks below split wide, vomiting darkness. The eye widened, and for a single blinding moment, the chapel was nothing but light and shadow colliding. Daniel's cry was lost in the roar. Episode 20, The Room Without End. The chapel shattered with the sound of stone breaking, as though the earth itself were tearing open. Daniel fell backward. His hands burned raw from the candle, his robe soaked with crimson wax that clung like blood. From the abyss rose not one figure, but countless shapes, bodies woven together like a tapestry of suffering. Their faces were familiar, every guest who had ever stayed in the motel. Their eyes glowed with the same endless hunger, their voices fused into one, echoing through the fractured walls. "We are free." The candle sputtered and died. Darkness flooded the chapel, broken only by the burning eyes that multiplied in the air. The flame creature that had taunted him was gone, swallowed into the greater shadow, its laughter now part of the many voices. Daniel crawled toward the door, but the chapel had no door anymore. Where the exit once stood was only a hallway lined with peeling wallpaper, buzzing lights, and stained carpets. The motel. He was back in the motel. Room 6 glowed faintly at the end of the corridor, its door opened just a crack. The familiar brass number dangled loosely, as if it had been waiting for him all along. The voices whispered behind him, growing closer, seeping through the walls. The hallway lengthened with every desperate step he took. No matter how far he ran, room 6 remained the same distance away, always just out of reach. "Please," his voice cracked. "If there is still a God, let me out." But the motel did not answer with salvation. It answered with silence, broken only by the slow creak of room 6's door swinging wider. Daniel stopped running. His chest heaved. Tears burned his face. He understood now. The room had never been a place. It had been a mouth, a cage, a womb, and he had been its caretaker, its priest, its warden. Behind him, the voices drew closer, the floor trembling as the countless freed souls pressed forward. The smell of smoke and rot filled the hall. Room 6 waited. Daniel took one last breath and stepped inside. The door closed without a sound, and the motel, as it always had, waited for its next guest.
Epilogue: The next reservation. The motel sign flickered against the night sky, its neon letters humming faintly, vacancy. A storm gathered on the horizon, low thunder rolling like a warning. The parking lot was empty, save for one car pulling in slowly, headlights slicing the darkness. A woman stepped out, tired, soaked from the rain, her suitcase dragging behind her. She looked up at the sign, squinting, then at the long, low building lined with identical doors. She hesitated. Something about the place felt wrong, but exhaustion outweighed instinct. She climbed the steps and entered the lobby. At the desk sat a man in a faded clerk's uniform, his head bowed as if asleep. The woman cleared her throat. "Do you have a room?" The man lifted his face. His eyes were shadowed, but his voice was calm, practiced, almost too practiced. "Yes," he said, sliding a tarnished key across the counter. The brass tag glinted under the fluorescent light. "Room 6. The woman frowned. "Isn't anyone else here?" The man smiled faintly, a smile that did not quite belong to him. "This room never stays empty." She took the key, unaware of the faint scorch marks still on the man's hands, or the way the motel's walls seemed to shiver with quiet hunger. As she walked down the hall, the lights above buzzed louder. The door to room 6 stood ajar, waiting. Inside, something stirred. The motel had found its next guest.